Antoinette Frank, the Wolf in New Orleans. Antoinette Renee Frank entered the New Orleans Police Department in 1993. Initially, she appeared to be a stellar addition. Young, driven, and one of the few black female officers in a department desperate for better community relations. However, veteran officers soon noticed disturbing behavioral patterns. Frank was reckless and struggled with the fundamental ethics of law enforcement. Most alarmingly, she gravitated toward the criminal element she was meant to combat. She formed an illicit alliance with Rogers Lacaze, an 18-year-old drug dealer, even allowing him into restricted police areas and her patrol vehicle. By 1995, Frank was drowning in financial debt. Seeking a desperate exit, she and Lacaze conspired to rob the Kim Ann restaurant, where Frank worked part-time security. The Vu family, who owned the establishment, viewed her as a trusted protector. On the night of March 4th, Frank used her key to let Lacaze inside. When her fellow officer, Ronnie Williams, attempted to intervene, Frank executed him with a shot to the head. She then oversaw the execution of 17-year-old Ha Vu and 24-year-old Quang Vu. Despite her attempt to return to the scene later to investigate, the surviving sister identified her. Frank was sentenced to death and remains on death row today. A haunting reminder that a badge can sometimes be a license for slaughter. Before we move to the next chilling case, if you find these deep dives into the dark side of justice fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more investigations coming your way. Yvonne Wu, the obsession of a 72nd Precinct veteran. On October 13, 2021, in Brooklyn, New York, the silence of 19th Avenue was shattered by a volley of gunfire. When authorities arrived, they found NIPD officer Yvonne Wu standing calmly outside a residence. Her service weapon surrendered. With terrifying composure, she stated, "I shot them both." Wu, a 7-year veteran known for being disciplined and quiet, had allowed a simmering obsession to boil over into homicide. The victims were Jamie Liang and Wu's former girlfriend, Jenny Lee. Following a bitter breakup, Wu became consumed by jealousy when Lee began dating Liang. On that October evening, Wu broke into Lee's home and waited. When the couple arrived, Wu opened fire with her department-issued handgun. Liang was killed instantly. Lee survived but was left with permanent physical and psychological scars. In 2024, Wu pleaded guilty to manslaughter and attempted murder, receiving a 27-year sentence. Her case remains a staggering example of how personal volatility can turn a professional protector into a cold-blooded executioner. Valerie Cicinelli, the murder-for-hire plot. In April 2019, the FBI began monitoring a decorated New York officer who was orchestrating a double homicide. Valerie Cicinelli, a mother and a 12-year veteran of the NIPD, wasn't targeting criminals. She was targeting her estranged husband and her boyfriend's 15-year-old daughter. Cicinelli's personal life was a vortex of custody battles and financial strain, leading her to seek a permanent, violent solution. Unbeknownst to her, the boyfriend she asked to find a hitman had already turned informant. For $7,000, Cicinelli demanded the disappearance of her husband and the teenager, whom she viewed as an obstacle to her lifestyle. The FBI eventually staged a fake crime scene, showing her photos of her dead husband to secure her confession. She was recorded complaining about the high cost of killing a child. Cicinelli was sentenced to 48 months in federal prison after a plea deal for obstruction of justice. Though she was released in 2024, her legacy is defined by a level of cruelty that shocked even the most seasoned federal agents. Are you shocked by how these officers used their training for evil? Let us know in the comments which case you find the most disturbing. Your feedback helps us bring you the stories that matter most. Amber Geiger, The Fatal Mistake, in Unit 1478. On September 6, 2018, 26-year-old Botham Jean was relaxing in his Dallas apartment, eating ice cream. He had no criminal record and posed no threat. That peace was shattered when Officer Amber Geiger, still in uniform after a double shift, entered his apartment and shot him dead. Geiger claimed she believed she was in her own unit, which was directly below Jean's, and mistook him for a burglar. The prosecution dismantled her mistake defense by pointing to the bright red welcome mat outside Jean's door and the vastly different interior layout. They argued that Geiger was distracted by a phone conversation with a colleague she was having an affair with and acted with criminal negligence. The trial ended with a murder conviction and a 10-year sentence. The case became a global symbol of police accountability, punctuated by the viral moment when Botham's brother, Brant, offered Geiger a hug of forgiveness in the courtroom. Despite multiple appeals, Geiger remains incarcerated, denied parole as recently as late 2024. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu, South Africa's insurance killer. Between 2012 and 2018, South African Police Sergeant Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu lived a terrifying double life. While she patrolled the streets as a protector, she was systematically murdering her own relatives to collect life insurance payouts. Over 6 years, she orchestrated the deaths of 6 people, including her cousin, sister, and boyfriend. Ndlovu's method was cold and clinical. She would take out multiple policies on a relative and then hire hitmen to execute them in ways that looked like random street violence. She collected over 400,000 rand, roughly $27,000, from her boyfriend's death alone. Her spree finally ended when she attempted to hire a hitman to burn her elderly mother and 5 other relatives alive inside a house. The hitmen, horrified by the request, informed the authorities and recorded her giving instructions. In 2021, she was sentenced to 6 life terms, 1 for each murder, marking her as one of the most prolific serial killers in the history of the South African Police Service. We are halfway through this list of the most notorious wolves in uniform. If you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Karen Reed, The Blue Wall of Silence. January 29, 2022, saw one of the most controversial deaths in Boston's modern history. John O'Keefe, a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police, was found dead in a snowbank outside the home of a fellow officer. His girlfriend, Karen Reed, was charged with second-degree murder, with prosecutors alleging she struck him with her SUV in a drunken rage. However, the case took a wild turn when the defense alleged a massive police frame-up. They argued O'Keefe was actually beaten inside the house by other officers and his body was dumped outside to protect the blue wall. The trial became a media circus, fueled by the Free Karen Reed movement. In June 2024, the jury deadlocked, leading to a mistrial. While the prosecution intends to retry her, the case has forever damaged public trust in the regional authorities, leaving the truth behind O'Keefe's death buried under layers of institutional suspicion and conflicting forensic evidence. Alfreda Fluker, a detective's lethal jealousy. In Birmingham, Alabama, Detective Alfreda Fluker was a respected 15-year veteran of the crime reduction team. But on April 10, 2020, she used her investigative skills to track her ex-boyfriend, Sergeant Mario White, to a late-night meeting in a park. Inside an unmarked police car, White was sitting with 39-year-old Kennesia Fuller. Fluker did not confront them. She opened fire. She pumped multiple rounds into the vehicle, killing Fuller and critically wounding White. Her department was forced to arrest one of their own detectives within hours. At her 2023 trial, Fluker's defense argued she had suffered an emotional breakdown, but her calculated tracking of the victims suggested premeditation. She was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. For the Birmingham PD, the case served as a grim reminder that the most dangerous criminals are sometimes the ones sitting in the desk next to you. Lori Bambi Bembenek, the Playboy Bunny Cop. The case of Lori Bembenek is a staple of Milwaukee folklore. A former Playboy bunny who joined the police force in 1980, Bambi was fired after just months for blowing the whistle on internal corruption. Shortly after, the ex-wife of her new husband was found murdered. Bembenek was charged with the crime, with the prosecution alleging she used her husband's off-duty revolver to commit the deed. Despite claims that she was being framed by the department she had embarrassed, she was convicted in 1982. Her story became legendary when she escaped from prison in 1990, fleeing to Canada and sparking a national Run Bambi Run movement. Though she eventually took a plea deal to secure her release in 1992, she maintained her innocence until her death in 2010. Whether she was a cold-blooded killer or a victim of a vengeful police department remains one of the greatest true crime debates in American history. These stories prove that justice isn't always blind. Sometimes it's wearing a mask. Stick around for our final two cases that redefine the meaning of police brutality. Stephanie Lazarus, the 23-year secret. For over 2 decades, Stephanie Lazarus was a star detective in the LAPD's elite art theft detail. She was respected, married to another officer, and hiding a dark secret from 1986. In that year, Lazarus had murdered Sherry Rasmussen, the woman who had married Lazarus's ex-boyfriend. Lazarus had broken into the home, beaten Sherry, and shot her 3 times. She successfully staged the scene to look like a botched burglary, and because she was a fellow officer, her colleagues never considered her a suspect. The case went cold until 2009, when DNA technology allowed investigators to test a bite mark left on the victim's arm. The saliva was a match for Lazarus. In a dramatic interrogation caught on film, Lazarus realized her 23-year deception was over. She was convicted of first-degree murder in 2012. Her fall from a top-tier detective to a convicted murderer is perhaps the ultimate example of how the badge can provide a decades-long cover for the most personal of crimes. These women swore an oath to protect the public, but instead, they weaponized their authority for murder, greed, and revenge. They remind us that the uniform is only as honorable as the person wearing it. If you want to see more investigations into power and corruption, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We'll see you in the next deep dive.